Welcome back to Race for the White House. We are unlocking the doors, heading inside the war rooms of the presidential campaigns to determine which strategies are working, which are not. Back with us, Ed Schultz, Farai Shadea, and Kornbluk, and Joe Scarborough. First up, our own panelists tonight. Ed Schultz, while warming up an audience at an Obama fundraiser in North Dakota, caused quite a stir when he launched an attack at John McCain, saying the following, quote, "He voted for this war. He's a perpetrator of the war. He's an advocate of the war. In my personal definition, that's a warmonger." The McCain camp called on Obama to condemn the remarks, and the Obama camp is responding with this statement. The quote board, "John McCain is not a warmonger and should not be described as such. He is a supporter of the war that Senator Obama believes should have never been authorized and never been waged." Ed Schultz on the program tonight. Do you regret making those comments about John McCain?
Absolutely not, David. He is a warmonger. His policies and his positions on Iraq certainly parallel that of a warmonger, and he fits the description. I'm really surprised at the McCain camp, how they got their back over this. Number one, I don't speak for Barack Obama. Barack Obama doesn't speak for me. I did not introduce him at this event. I was asked by the North Dakota Democrats to come in and warm up the crowd, and that's exactly what I did. And in this speech, I talked about those who oppose the policy and those who were in favor of it. And I don't think there's any question that the labeling of John McCain as a warmonger, he fits the description. He has no end game in Iraq. He wants to throw the Russians out of the G8. Just this weekend, he talked about upgrading the United States military and didn't offer any way on how they were going to pay for it.
But
the man's a warmonger.
Ed, let me just interject here. Let me just, Ed, let me just interject here to I think critics of you would raise a couple of points. One is somebody who knows war, who has fought in a war, let alone been a war prisoner, is not somebody who likes war. And number two is his record also demonstrates that while he did vote for the war, authorized the war, supported the surge, he was also quite critical of the management of this war and of Don Rumsfeld. Is it really fair to level that judgment against him?
Absolutely it is, because he has failed to offer any kind of end game in Iraq. He continues to support this failed Bush policy in Iraq. He has not set any deadlines. He has not talked about drawing down troops. Heck, we all want to get out of Iraq, but has anybody got a checkbook? I mean, this is gutting the infrastructure of America, and John McCain wants to continue on with a third Bush policy, and the American people are not with him on this. He won't pivot and go into any negotiations at all. He's a warmonger.
Let me move on. Next up, Hillary Clinton is trying to win over the anti-war voter with a new twist in her stump speech. Listen to this.
When Senator Obama came to the Senate, he and I have voted exactly the same except for one vote. And that happens to be the facts. We both voted against early deadlines. I actually started criticizing the war in Iraq before he did.
And Kornbluk, does that make sense to you?
Well, the campaign's explanation for her saying that she started criticizing the war before he did is to narrow the time frame. They said she wasn't talking about before the war. She's only talking about since the time they've both been in the Senate. The Obama campaign has pointed to statements he made before she did, even within that narrow time frame, suggesting that he was critical of it before she was. So that said, this goes over well with her crowds. A lot of people in her crowds, I can tell you, having traveled with her a lot, are looking for a way to explain her war vote. A lot of them are anti-war people. Right. Often she gets questions saying, what do I tell my friends about why you voted for the war? Or, I really like you, why'd you vote for it? So I think this is her way of trying to give her audiences something to hold on to. Not really sure it sticks.
But Joe Scarborough, you know that the Democratic primary voter is pretty well acquainted with their feelings about the war. They also know that Hillary Clinton voted for the war. Does it really make any sense whatsoever to come out and say, well, I started criticizing it before him, as if nobody remembers the vote?
Well, I don't think it makes sense for her to do it in April. I've actually been saying since last summer, the thing that I kept looking for, and I'd actually ask Obama people when they'd come on the show, is I'd say, name one vote that you have taken that's different than Hillary Clinton's since you've entered the United States Senate. She should have started beating this drum 6-9 months ago because there really isn't a lot of difference between Barack Obama. And that's when she could say, talk is cheap. Okay, great. He gave a speech in 2002, but since he's come to the U.S. Senate, can he name a single vote where we've differed? And for the most part, he can't. But again, I think too little, too late.
All right, let's move on. Finally, Hillary Clinton has been using a rather dark and gloomy tactic to hammer home support for her health care plan. Listen.
The doctors and the nurses tried very hard, but they weren't able to save her baby. For 15 days in the intensive care unit, doctors and nurses worked heroically, but she died. It is so wrong in this such a good, great, and rich country that a young woman and her baby would die because she didn't have health insurance or $100 to get examined.
The problem is some reports say the story isn't true. Oblennis Memorial Hospital in Ohio says the woman was not denied medical care and that she actually had insurance. Shadea, it's again raising some questions about the anecdote she's telling on the trail and her trustworthiness.
Well, there's a question about how she got this anecdote in the first place, that it was probably a secondhand recycled account. It's very dramatic, but obviously when you tell stories, on the stump, you really have to be sure about where they're coming from. But I think it also points out a completely interesting rhetorical and stylistic narrative where Senator Clinton seems to have been getting juice from really talking about worst case scenarios, and Senator Obama has been choosing the best case scenarios, hope, change, etc. They're both rhetorical.
Yeah. All right, coming up, we're going to take a break here. Thanks to their newly released tax returns, we now know the Clintons earned $109 million since 2000. How will all of that resonate with middle America? And later in the show, it's your turn to play with the panel. Call us 212-790-2299 or email us at race08@msnbc.com. The race from Nationals Park in Washington tonight is coming right back.